Hi, I'm Johann the Papermaker. Yeah, it's about 1480, something like that, the late 1400s, pretty modern time. We are really working as a papermaker. I have a lot of demand for my product. Now, you know why? My grandfather, Johannes Gutenberg, yes, he invented movable type. Move all those little letters around and print books, and well, because of that, there's a lot of books and people want to read them. And because they want to read them, there's a lot of books. So people, this is the first generation that people really were able to get a book and to have a reason to learn to read. Fascinating point about it is I'm going to have to tell you where we get all the stuff we make the paper from. You just can't go to a store and buy it. They just sell vegetables and things. Now, what we do is, notice my nice fancy clothes? As I wear them out, I want the newest fashion. My wife, she may cut these up and make ones for the kinders. You know, we have quite a few. And eventually, you run out of a use for the rag, the material, and it turns into the rag that you clean around the house. Now, once the rag gets to where you can't clean it anymore, you don't throw it away. The rag man will buy it, give you a few little farthings for it, and off you go. You're happy, he's happy, and he takes it down to the mill and they smash it into tiny little bits. Now let me show you something. Once it gets smashed, I have the pulp right here. Let me show you. This pulp has been to the mill, been ground to tiny little pieces. I don't know if you can see it there. Let me show you. Look at that. Almost like porridge. I wouldn't suggest eating though. Not very good. But here you got this type of fiber. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into the vat here. Just put a little bit in. That's about all I need right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir that up. And I'm going to put it onto my screen. This screen sifts out the fibers from the water. Now, this little gizmo here, it's called a decal. That's French for fence. And when I put it on a screen like this, I get, let's see, how many sheets of paper? You know, 1, 2. Right, I can make 2 for the price of 1. Well, if I didn't want to make 2 tiny pieces, I could use a bigger decal like this and put it on and make a larger sheet. Totally up to you. Sometimes I have screens this big for making huge sheets of paper. But that's another story. Right now, I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to take this, rinse a little bit of the back part off. This looks a little bit messy. Okay, that looks good. And what I'm going to do is stir this up. I want to get all those fibers going. And now I'm going to hold the decal with my thumbs, and I'm going to dip it into the vat. Very carefully. It's slowing down the water. Do you hear that suction? It pulled down the screen. If I'm not too good, I'll end up making a mess between it. So a little bit leaks through there. But let me show you what this looks like here, up closer. You can see that there's a little pile of paper on there. And look at this. You really can't pick it up. No, because there's nothing much there. Just water and the fibers. The nice thing is I could just go ahead and put it back in the vat. Just like this. Now, you know, if there wasn't this dang plague going on, I'd have my workers here, and I wouldn't have to do the whole thing myself. But right now, I'm going to do the vat man's job. I'm going to hand it to the coucher's job, who the coucher has to, once paper's been made, you can see their sheets there, have to take a piece of felt and put it on top of it. And this felt separates the pieces of paper that you're making, and it sucks up the water so that they'll be much drier. And then when the coucher's done doing that, the coucher and myself, the vat man, and we may get the lineman, we'll put a whole bunch of these on. We'll put it in the press here and squish it flat. Then I hand all that pile to the lineman and he hangs them up here. Pretty neat job. In fact, in a day, the 4 of us can make about 4,000 sheets of paper. That is, if we have enough of the pulp. Well, let me show you how it works here. All right, I'm going to stir this up. It's all nice and slishy. Now, on a day like today, it's nice and warm water. I tell you, making paper in the winter, woo, cold. So I slide it down in there. Listen carefully. There's a suction because the screen gets all blocked by the pulp. Now look, we now have 2 new sheets of paper. And I'm going to put this down here. Put it upside down. It doesn't fall off, it sticks to the screen. And now my job, as the goosher, is to rub carefully to kind of let the paper know that it should stick to the felt and not to the screen. And look at that. I've got 2 nice new pieces of paper. And now I'm going to make another 2 sheets. So I'm a goosher right now. And now I'm a vat man. That's with a V. You wouldn't want to have any of those bees running around. They're kind of strange creatures. So, hold the decal on, put it underneath, lift it up, let it drain, pull off the decal, put it there. See, we get a nice rhythm going here, and it works really well for making lots of paper. There we go, another 2 outstanding sheets of paper. I tell you what, I'm going to turn this off and start again once I've used up all these felts and made a pile. You can see I've made a lot of paper here. I'm almost out of felts. I'm going to take this 1 piece of felt and put it on this half of the pile, because what I want to do now is I want to take all the water that I can get out and squeeze it out. So I make a single pile, and look how thick that is. That's really, really thick, because there's a lot of water in it. And look, without even doing much to it, it starts to drip all over the place. That shows you how much it is. I'm going to put it in my press, and then I'm going to squish it flat. This press is capable of doing 10 to 50 tons of pressure. Imagine, you've heard of those magnificent creatures, the elephants. Imagine having one stand on it. That might be equivalent of 1 or so 2,000 pounds of pressure. But if this does 10 to 50, can you imagine putting a pile of elephants on there? Okay, now we can see that we're ready to squish the water out. So watch this here. So we don't use elephants. Not a good idea. Too much to clean up after them. Besides, I don't have that many peanuts laying around the house. So as I squeeze this down, water gets squished out. And we're looking at that, and I'm wondering, is that enough? I don't see any more dripping here. No more dripping out. So what I'm going to do is let it up here. Yeah, this really is about as hard as it looks. And remember how thick it was? Look at that. It's about half the... And this? Look. Woohoo! There's a lot of water taken out of this. So having done this now, we're going to hand this over to the lineman, and he's going to take them off. And so we're going to readjust this here. You can see that there's a few... Well, actually, there's no room at all. We're going to have to take some sheets off. So bear with me while I take those off and we're ready. For taking the paper off, it's not too hard at all. What you need to do is just grab hold of it and you gently pull it apart. Now it wants to stick a little bit, but that's okay. Take that off. And don't lay it down on something wet or you undo your work, which is not a good idea. Now this is, look at this. It's a brand new piece of paper, and you're wondering, what good is it? Well, I'll show you. We still have many steps to go. I don't know about many, but we have a few steps to go before we're going to send this over to the printers. Let me just take a few more of these off. And this nice weather here is good and dry. In a big hurry. In the winter, sometimes it can be very hard to get this paper to dry. And it gives us more time to work on other things. Maybe singing or playing games. And I tell you, we can go down to the miller's and, well, that's another story. But I tell you, it does pass away the time in those long winter nights. Let me just take another row off and I'll show you how to hang it up here. Occasionally you get a little oopsie there. It's okay. We can use that for other things. But I'll tell you, one of the things about my paper is the quality is good and consistent. People know when they got my paper, it's going to be good enough for their business. We're now going to come back and take care of this paper that has been flattened by the press. And I'm going to now take off the felts. And you can see, look at this. There's hardly any height to it at all. All the water's been squished out of it. So my job sometimes is really hard to get this going. Other times it's very easy. Look at this, I just peel it off like that. Oh, that's one of those little sneaky devils. Guess what? We'll just throw it back in the vat. Nobody will ever know. One of the nicest things, you don't lose a lot of work here. You just recycle it. Well, this is not working. I'm going to attempt to pull out this paper and hopefully hang it up here without too much trouble. Sometimes it's really a sneaky little guy. As you see me pull it off here, it looks so easy. It is in theory. And I just lay it over like that. And I take the next felt off, and I take the next corner of the paper off. And I peel it off, and I hang it up to dry. With practice, you make progress. You get better and better. Sometimes they just don't work well. But you can see through it right here. A nice even consistency. You learn to figure out what works the best. I'm going to do this here. One more sheet. Oh, look at that. It's one of those that's going to be used for the kids. They get to play with it. Shall we try one more? And right there. Now I'll tell you, the best way to do this is having it in your house in the upper stairs where the air will flow even in the winter time, flow through, and you don't get these breezes interrupting. But right now, we need to do it out here. I'd like to show you something. I've hung some of these up to dry, as the lineman's job would do, and other times I've left them on the felts. When I hang them up over there, they end up with a little crease down the middle, and when I have them on this, they don't. So sometimes we have needs for different types. I just very carefully peel the felt off of the paper. If I were to peel the paper off of the felt the other direction around, I'd have a piece of paper that was curled. Let me show you. Now, of course, once you're showing it won't work, but anyway. So if I peel off like this, then I end up with a little, end up with the little edges that curl a bit. Like I said, sometimes it works that way, sometimes it doesn't. But what I would do is, I've got a piece of paper right now that has a little texture of the felt. You can call it the tooth of the paper, just like tooth. And this is a little smoother, sometimes depending upon whether it was on the screen side or the other. So imagine, as I'm making my paper, and it gets done, this side here has the screen side, and the other side tends to be smoother. Right now, if I were to write on this or try to print on it, I'd have such a bumpy, smooth, bumpy texture that it wouldn't be quite smooth enough. So what I'm going to do is take a glass paperweight, a smooth piece of glass, and iron it or burnish it. Now, I could also do that with, let's say, a river rock. I could use a very heavy piece of oak that's been polished up. I could even use a piece of iron. Problem with the iron, if you're not careful, you get those red stains on it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some paper. I've taken it off of the line. And what I'm going to do is check to see that these edges are nice and true to each other. So I'm going to true them up and just put a little wrinkle, a little crease in it like that. So these right here already look like they're pretty well done. They line up pretty closely, and that's good enough for me. When they start to get off a little bit, sometimes you can decide, hey, I'm going to fix it. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. Let's take a look at this one, for instance. It's way off, but that's okay. We're just going to move it right to there. And my job as the burnisher now is to keep these pieces that you would think aren't any good, but to burnish them down, to iron them down with something that's really smooth and really heavy. And what that does is it makes the surface of the paper a lot more usable. Imagine trying to write on this with a quill right now. You'd be here, you'd be writing, and the quill would be bumping up and down. You'd get ink everywhere. Or if you put it in the printing press, as my grandfather would do, and you stamp it on there, there would be little white spots where the print didn't quite reach the paper. So our job as the burnisher is to iron the paper out. We don't use heat, although we could, but why? We're just going to put pressure. So I've got a rock in the hard place, or in this case, glass. I could use a piece of iron, but it would sometimes leave little red streaks on it. And so I'm just going to use this paper right here. And I'll move this up here so the wind doesn't blow it. Now, this side here, you might be able to tell it has more texture to it. That's different than this side. This side's texture doesn't really look the same. So this one was probably the screen side. So remember, when you're making your paper, if it had been made here and lifted off, this side is going to be smoother, and this side will have this texture of the screen in. So I'm making sure that these are trued up. That means that their edges line up, the front and back. And I'm going to hold it with my hand, and I have to be careful not to hurt the paper. All I want to do is iron it to burnish it down, and I'm using some pressure to it. And I'm holding on to it several places and pulling. If I push to it, of course, I can get a wrinkled paper, and I don't want to do that. And this is a job that all the work prior to this, if I mess it up, all of those guys are going to be upset with me. The lineman's going to be upset because he hung it up and it was all nice and neat. The kosher's going to be upset because he removed it from the screen properly. Everybody who pressed it in the press is going to be upset. The vat man's going to be upset. And frankly, I don't want them upset with me. That's why I get paid more. So I take this work here and I'm smoothing it out. Now, actually, you see me turning it over, but I've still only done one side of the paper, haven't I? So think about this. I have done that side and that side, that one, but I haven't done this side. So if I am going to write on that, I have to open it up and do the same thing over here too. And it's just more time, but it's okay. It's a part of doing the job right. Now I want to make a bifold. Bi means two, and of course you see that I have it folded. So I can print on it like this, and we can print on the other side, And if we get a bunch of these together, we can have them folded, and we can then stitch them together to make a small little book. And these edges would be all nice and neatly lined up. That's another story for another time.